And rolling. Okay. So we'll start with your name.
All right. Well, I'm Kathryn Skidmore Blair.
And where were you born?
I was born in Cuba, Havana, Cuba, in 1920. Now, if you're good at arithmetic, you'll know how old I am.
1920s. So, and you came out with a book?
I certainly did. In 1995. The only book I had ever written up until then, and a book that took me 25 years to research and write and rewrite and rewrite until I got it published.
What is the name of the book?
In English, it's In the Shadow of the Angel. And in Spanish, where it is now a classic, it's A la Sombra del Ángel. And in 2010, when it was the bicentennial here in Mexico, my new publisher published a special issue that has the face of the angel monument on the cover in gold. It's lovely. But that angel is the angel on the top of Mexico's Independence Monument.
Ah.
And that monument was built by my husband's grandfather,
Oh.
Antonio Rivas Mercado.
And where was he from?
Mexico, of Spanish descent way back, but his father sent him to England by himself when he was 11. And his father had a partner who was English who received him and put him in a boys' boarding school.
Mm-hmm.
And at 16, from 11 to 16, he was of course speaking not only perfect English, but knew London and its environments very well. He escaped from the school and went to France. And from there on, he was French.
And this is your husband's father?
Grandfather.
Grandfather.
Yes.
That built the angel, but was he French? Because was it a
No,
French
he
gift?
was Mexican.
The angel? Okay.
He was the youngest son of a large family and a very, very successful. In those days, you know, everybody had an hacienda, like a big estate on a huge piece of property. But he was the youngest, and his father just came one day and said to his wife, "I'm taking Antonio on a trip." He never came back. Well, he did, of course, eventually, but he graduated on his own, totally. Because when his father found out that he'd left school at 16, he said, "I'm cutting you off. If that's the way you feel, support yourself." He was a very heavy-set, tall man. He had no trouble getting a job in the wineries, lifting boxes of wine. And he got his title as an architect at Beaux-Arts in Paris and as an engineer at the Sorbonne. And one of his daughters, not his daughters, one of his sisters came to France and told him that his mother was dying and she wouldn't die until he came back to Mexico. So he returned and the mother did not die. but he became a really prime architect in Mexico, and he was the director of San Carlos Institute. Maybe you know San Carlos. You know, right alongside of the palace. It was the Art and Architecture Institute, and his career there was very, very, very interesting. I tell a lot of his story in my book.
Okay, and let's go back to you. You were born in Cuba in 1920 exactly? And tell us about that story.
Well, frankly, my father was the director of an American company called the National Paper and Type Company. And they had their headquarters on Wall Street, but only operated in Latin America. And they, when my dad, as an adventurous young man, got to New York, he looked in the want ads in the Wall Street Journal and found that this company was looking for a young person, a man, who had to have at least these two qualifications: be very familiar with a linotype machine and spoke Spanish. And my father's parents were teachers along the border with Mexico. So he grew up speaking Spanish. And he learned how to run a linotype in Monterrey, Mexico. And there he worked with the newspapers, and he knew all about that machine that printed the paper. And so he got the job, and he met my mother there.
And where did they went to Cuba?
In Cuba, in Havana.
Havana.
He was transferred to Havana and met my mother there. And my brother Stuart, my sister Tita, and I were born in Cuba. But my sister Trudy was born in Mexico.
And were you affected by the politics in Cuba? Is that why you returned?
No, I had my third birthday in Mexico.
Okay.
And frankly, I returned to Cuba quite often in my later career, but after Castro, I promised myself I would not go back until he died, and I hope I outlive him.
So then you were raised here in Mexico?
Yes, I was.
So, and this is your home?
This has always been, I've actually lived in Mexico 70 years, but it's always been mi tierra, this is where I come back. This is where I always come back. And now I wouldn't leave Mexico for anything. So many advantages here, my heavens. And I always tell Americans, one of the things I love about Mexico is you can count on a change, and that might be tomorrow.
So your book, tell us more about your book. What inspired you to write about?
Well, it's interesting. I had always wanted to write a book. I began to read history at a very early age because my dad was an encyclopedia and insisted that, that we read. And I read most of the classics by the time I was 14. And so I'd always wanted to write a book. But I got all involved in many other things, decorating and this and that and the other, a marriage, a divorce, a remarriage. And so I never found anything that really and truly inspired me to spend a lot of time writing until I married Donald Blaire. And he was Donald Antonio Blaire Rivas Mercado. But Don had just returned from the artillery and had gone all through from the landing in Omaha Beach to the end of the war, and then returned to Mexico to live, and brought with him an English bride that I think they had seen each other 3 times. And when I met him, they were divorced and he had the 3 children. And Don and I were the same age, only 6 months difference, and our personal experiences were very different. But when I asked him where he lived as a child, and he told me, he said, Calle Jalisco, but the entrance of the house was on Monterrey, the house was on a triangle. I said, I know that house. I lived across the street. Imagine. And so I asked him, I said, did you have a dog that always came and barked at the gate and you were running after it? He said, that would be me. And I said, when in the world would I have thought that I was going to marry that little boy?
So what made you inspired to write the book? What about him? What inspired you?
Well, it wasn't really about him, it was about his mother. Because his mother died in Paris when he was 11, and he was left in a boarding house in Bordeaux. And when I heard this, I thought, you know, how ill was she? Where was she? Why couldn't he visit her? And her 2 sisters, Tia Alicia and Tia Amelia, were wonderful ladies. We became very close friends, and I was continually questioning them. And every time I came to Antonieta, Don's mother, I would say, you know, what did she die from? What happened? Why wasn't anyone with her? And they said, well, Antonieta was her own person. She was ill at the time, and she was very ill. And well, she died in the hospital. What else can we tell you? Great shame. And I kept getting that same story over and over. And somehow, I felt that it was a little bit fishy, because occasionally they would change the exact wording and locate her somewhere else. And so, by absolute coincidence, I received a letter from a Mexican friend from UCLA who said, I've just read in the paper that you have married Antonieta's son, Donald Blaire. And I want you to know that my family adored her, the most intelligent, attractive woman that existed. And what a pity that she committed suicide in Notre Dame Cathedral.
Wow.
Well, that certainly stirred me. And so I began to investigate. The first thing I thought was, why did she abandon her son? He was picked up by the Mexican consul and sent back to Mexico.
Why in Notre Dame?
Why Notre Dame? Why kill herself?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the story I tell in The Shadow of the Angel. Her life. She was 30 when she died. And she was a magnificent advocate of the arts. And now she's recognized as the person who really instigated modern art in Mexico. And she was just super talented. But since nobody in the family said anything about her, her name was absolutely not to be mentioned. I had to start going around and finding people who knew her, finding people who knew someone who knew her. And it took me 25 years to dig up all the information I needed and to write the book. And I got so that I was really obsessed with Antonieta.
And was she known in Europe? Or was it more she was her advocate of the arts in Mexico?
No, primarily Mexico. She took a trip to Europe with her father. She was then married to Albert Blaire. But they weren't getting along, so he gave her permission to take her son, and her father wanted to return to Europe and show her and his younger daughter his Europe. And they stayed 3 years. So Don remembers the first foreign language he really learned was French. And and in those 3 years, imagine, this was right after the First World War, Paris was just bursting with everything new. Picasso painting, music by, well, I can't think of, all the modern music, and modern literature, and she was there 3 years. And when she returned to Mexico, she said Mexico was behind the United States and Europe 25 years. They were still playing sobre las olas, which is...
And rolling.
Okay.
Okay.
My collar straight?
Yeah.
Okay.
You look beautiful. So, the second book is called
Forging a Nation.
Forging a Nation.
The story of Mexico.
And what inspired you to write that?
My love of Mexico. And I feel that so many people misunderstand Mexico. And I felt that if Americans particularly knew what Mexico had to go through to arrive at this point where it really is a democracy today. And there was always a fringe on the edge of that word democracy that could be cut off. And so I wrote it for people in the United States primarily. I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren on both sides of the border. And the ones here love to go up there, and the ones up there love to come down here. But you know, it's always different. Being in a place that's different is always interesting. And so that's why I wrote it. And actually, I never expected it to be published in Mexico. I mean, there are quantities of books on Mexican history. But my publisher, Santillana, when she read the manuscript in Spanish, said, we want to publish it. And it's sold better here so far than it has there.
And when was this published?
About almost 2 years ago.
2 years ago. And can you tell us a little bit about what the book, besides it being history, what sets it apart from another history book?
As I say, because I tell it like a story. And whenever there was a real change in history, then I put in a paragraph or half a page the story of somebody living in that epoch, and how they were living and what it meant to them. So I have these little storiettes in the book. It's just a different approach, but it is the correct history of Mexico.
Because we were just talking right now about how it was the French, and then the Revolution, and then the PRI, and that's in your book.
That's in my book, it is.
The type of government.
Because I go back to the Olmecas. That's where I start.
Wow.
And I end with the president that just left office, Calderon. So
And
it's a full history.
So when you say you start with the Olmecs, where are they? What was that?
Well, they are the first discovered and known residents, native people, to have had a society. And they're from Yucatan. you know, along the peninsula. And so, along rather, pardon me, along where the Gulf turns into the Caribbean. Mexico has 3 beaches: the Gulf, the Caribbean, which is beautiful, and the Pacific, which is beautiful. And here we are, high in a mountain. The airport's at 7,500 feet. And we live in the most fantastic climate, I think, in the whole world. Never too hot, never too cold, flowers the whole year. I love Mexico, and Mexico City particularly.
And what year were the Olmecs?
The Olmecs go back 5,000 years before Christ.
Wow.
And I start by saying that there's I think the border with the United States is about, is it 1,000 kilometers? I don't recall. It's a long, long, long border. And the south of that border, there's a history that's 5,000 years old. So it's really just to inform people and stir their interest. And I think that the American press has taken the attitude until now that they're talking about the immigration problem, that you know, Mexico is a dangerous place and all the narcos and this and that. And I asked a friend from New York, I said, is your paper all full about who got killed in New York on the street or in the subway or here or a fight or whatever? Those aren't headlines. And here, of course, the only reason we have narcos in Mexico is because the biggest market for drugs in the world is on the other side of the border.
The U.S.
In the U.S., right.
And so did you write your book as a way to educate Mexicans
Yes, in a way,
and
to
also
inform.
Americans?
I won't say educate, but to inform.
To inform.
I had to consider that most history books are very boring. And so I selected the really important things that happened in Mexico and checked them out to make sure that I was correct with everything, and decided to tell it in a story fashion. And that's where I wrote the book.
And you also go into Montezuma in your book.
Oh, yes.
And the relationship between Montezuma and Cortez.
And Cortez.
Which is a fascinating relationship.
It is, it is.
And Montezuma's...
I read several of the letters that Cortez wrote to the king, Carlos III of Spain, in which he tells him that in Tenochtitlan, which is the capital of the Aztecs, he had met people who could easily enter into Spanish society. And there was a great, I would say, admiration perhaps between Cortez and Moctezuma. Respect is the word. And so Cortez had this marvelous translator who spoke the language, which was Nahuatl. And so she would be present in everything they discussed. I don't want to get too far into the history because I really and truly, well, I'll tell you something I'd like to talk about.
Okay.
The very place where I'm sitting. This is your grandmother's house. That's one of your grandmother's paintings. Can they see it? And it's a beautiful house. I hope you can turn the camera on this patio out here. It's just a gorgeous house. And your grandmother is a superb painter. And I've known her, I would judge, for close to 50 years.
Where did you meet her?
And I've always painted. I've loved painting. And today being Tuesday is the day that we painters come. We're now down to 2. But you know, being in the studio with Martha and painting is the most relaxing thing I know. You as a painter ought to know. You get involved in what you're doing and your mind is nowhere else. Isn't that true?
A little state of bliss.
It is. It is. And you're a very good painter, Martita.
And I learned from my grandmother.
I remember you as a little girl sitting on the steps when the studio was out here in the building in the garden. And she would give you some crayons or some watercolors which you could use. And you were there very happily painting. And looking at what you were doing made both of us think, this little girl's got talent.
Well,
and you do.
thank you. Where did you meet my grandma?
Well, I think we were both members of the Junior League, and I also think that we met probably the first time at the American Embassy, some party, because your grandfather, Mario, was a pilot, and my husband, Don, had been a pilot. And so they got to talking, you know. I think they knew each other before, but the separation between the South and the West, or the North, was huge in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw each other on and off during many years, and then I started painting with Martha. I had a decorating business then. I've had several careers before I started writing.
And so you met her through living in Mexico and
That's
being
right.
part of the same social
That's
circles
right.
and art and music and writing.
And your mother was a very good friend of my son. My son, by my first marriage, Reed Thorburn.
Right.
And your mother were in high school together. And then, of course, through Don, I inherited 3 wonderful children. And Vivian belonged to that group
Okay.
at the American school.
Okay.
And they've remained friends forever.
Yeah. I think I saw a video of you talking about the
Maybe so.
The American
Maybe
school.
so.
And can you tell us a little bit about what we were talking about for Diego and how you didn't know him personally, but
No, he had died when I started writing, but he was a counselor for Antonieta,
a counselor.
and of course Antonieta's father had helped him enormously in getting him his first scholarship to go to Europe. Diego was a maverick person, and I tell a story about him in The Shadow of the Angel. But Diego's daughter, whom we met and knew, Lupe Rivera, in San Miguel Allende when Don and I were living there. I said to Lupe, I said, I admire you enormously, knowing who your father was and who your mother was. And she looked at me and laughed, and she said, well, the reason I seem so normal is that I've only been working with a psychiatrist for 17 years.
What
a couple.
That's his daughter.
De veras.
By who? Who's the mother?
Lupe, she was his wife.
Uh-huh.
Diego always said he never married anyone. He did. And Lupe also published a wonderful cookbook on favorite recipes of Diego and Frida. And it's become very popular. Those, people who lived in those years of the 20s, of the beginning of everything new, really, those who lived it, really lived it, left their mark. And whether they were right or left or up or down didn't matter. And that's why I think that Mexico's history is so fascinating, because Mexico sort of absorbed things as they happened and left out the things they didn't like. And for example, when Antonieta created her theater, I mean, she came back from Europe and they were still, you know, Spaniards giving great speeches on the stage. And so the very first play that she translated from the French considered talking about sex on the stage. And so, of course, everybody said, "Pero Antonieta, nobody's going to come to the theater. I mean, this is terrible, terrible." And the people of that time, they said, "We were highly criticized, but the theater filled every night."
Highly criticized?
Mhm.
Because it was so avant-garde?
Because it was avant-garde, exactly. And it was called Ulysses.
Mm-hmm.
And Antonieta dropped her control of the theater and said, you know, Ulysses can now find his own way. She was an extraordinary woman.
Do you have photographs of her?
Yes, and I have photographs of her in the book.
Oh, good. Yeah.
She was not beautiful, but everybody I talked to who knew her said that her carriage, the way she spoke, her mannerisms, immediately people were drawn to her. And they said Antonieta would enter a room and everybody would turn around and look without knowing who she was or what she was. One of those people with real charisma, you know.
My grandmother is like that, too.
Yes, she is. She certainly is. And so...
what do you think it makes that kind of presence into somebody?
Well, I don't know, I haven't really... Well, in your grandmother's case, I mean, growing up in Arizona, starting on a ranch, going through what she's gone, and coming into Mexico without knowing anything about this country, making a great life for herself here, and enjoying it. I think, you know, and listening to everything on all sides, because conversations among the Mexicans are always those for and those against. I guess it's in the same in other countries. But it's interesting to see how certain people really draw you to them. You want to hear more. And she has a great sense of humor, which is important. Well, what can I say? I'm going to stay in Mexico. I love to travel. Long airplane trips don't fascinate me anymore, too long. But I go, recently I went to visit Reed and Barbara. It was for Thanksgiving. And they got together my 12 great-grandchildren. I had more fun with those kids. And I want them all to come to Mexico and visit.
Of course.
But of course, Don passed away in 2011, on the 16th of September. And somehow in my heart I knew he waited until it was the 16th. It was about 20 minutes after 12. I think in respect for his grandfather. And I miss him terribly, but 3 months before we celebrated 50 years marriage.
Wow.
A golden anniversary.
Wow.
And we, you know, friends and family, just galore and wonderful, wonderful people. I feel so privileged, really.
to be in Mexico.
Of course, I would like it even better if I hadn't fallen and broken my hip and have this great big piece of iron back there. But I'm getting along better.
Good. And where can you get your books?
What?
Where can you get your books?
Oh, in Mexico, in all the bookstores, in Spanish. But in English, on Amazon.com. And it, as I said, they published both the English and the Spanish, which surprised me. And now the Amazon.com in England and in Spain carries my book there.
Wow.
And so it's now, A la Sombra del Ángel is considered a classic in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
That means that it's going to be in bookstores forever.
Wow.
And that they will get out a new edition.
That's pretty impressive.
Hmm?
That's pretty impressive.
It is. It is. And I'm so happy I really had the courage and the